8-year-old Lily Reynolds was spending a quiet winter at her father's remote cabin in Montana's Bitterroot Mountains when a historic blizzard cut off all access to the outside world. 4 days into the snowstorm, a group of armed men forced their way into the cabin, searching for something her father had hidden. 3 desperate hours later, as the men tore apart the cabin, little Lily huddled in her secret hiding spot, clutching the collar of Shadow, her German shepherd. What happened next would forever haunt the mountains of Bitterroot, the night a child and her dog faced the most dangerous cartel in America, revealing a truth that would make even hardened FBI agents shudder. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The Bitterroot Mountains stood like ancient sentinels along the Montana-Idaho border, their jagged peaks draped in winter's heavy white cloak. In summer, these mountains were a paradise of wildflowers and crystal streams. In winter, they transformed into a beautiful but unforgiving wilderness where temperatures regularly plunged below zero, and snowdrifts could swallow a man whole. It was in this remote corner of America that Michael Reynolds had chosen to build his sanctuary, a place both to heal and to hide. The cabin itself was nothing extraordinary from the outside weathered cedar siding, a sturdy metal roof built to shed heavy snow, and windows that gleamed like watchful eyes across the valley. But what visitors couldn't see were the reinforced walls, the state-of-the-art security system disguised as rustic decor, and the hidden panic room behind the bookcase in Lily's bedroom. Michael Reynolds hadn't designed his mountain retreat just for peaceful getaways. As an undercover FBI agent specializing in cartel infiltration, he'd created a fortress that could protect his most precious treasure, his daughter. Lily Reynolds was small for her 8 years, with honey-brown hair often escaping from her braids and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of someone much older. Since losing her mother in what she believed was a car accident just 13 months ago, Lily had grown quieter, more observant. Her asthma, manageable in normal circumstances, flared dangerously under stress, leaving her dependent on the inhaler she carried everywhere. While other children her age collected dolls or trading cards, Lily filled sketchbooks with remarkably detailed drawings of animals and landscapes, capturing moments of beauty in a world that had shown her its cruelest face too early. "You see things others miss. Lilypad," her father often told her, using the nickname that always made her smile despite herself. "That's a rare gift." What Michael never told his daughter was how much her intuition worried him. How sometimes she would stop mid-sentence and stare out a window moments before a visitor arrived. How she seemed to know when he was about to call, reaching for the ringing phone before the first chime. These small moments, these glimpses of something he couldn't explain, both fascinated and terrified him. Shadow had come into their lives 6 months after Sarah's funeral, when the nightmares still had Lily waking up screaming for her mother. The German shepherd, with his intelligent brown eyes and silver-tipped black coat, had washed out of his police training program not for lack of ability, Michael later learned, but because of his fierce independence. The trainer had called him too willful. But Michael recognized something in the dog's steady gaze. This wasn't stubbornness. It was judgment. Shadow assessed every situation, every person, making his own decisions about who deserved his loyalty. "He's been through 3 handlers already," the rescue coordinator had warned. "Beautiful animal, smart as they come, but he doesn't trust easily." Neither did Lily anymore. Yet somehow, the mistrustful child and the suspicious dog had recognized something in each other immediately. Within days, Shadow was sleeping outside Lily's bedroom door. Within weeks, the nightmares had subsided. What Michael didn't know then, couldn't have known, was that Shadow had been specifically trained in avalanche rescue before washing out of the police program. The dog who now guarded his daughter knew not only how to track humans beneath snowdrifts, but how to defend those he considered his pack with lethal precision. The locals in the nearest town, a 40-minute drive down the mountain when the roads were clear, viewed the Reynolds with polite curiosity. They knew Michael as a wildlife photographer who traveled frequently, a convenient cover for his extended undercover operations. They adored Lily, who, despite her shyness, always remembered to thank the shopkeepers and ask about their families. And they respected Shadow, who carried himself with the quiet dignity of an old warrior, walking a perfect heel beside his young mistress through town. "That mountain chose you," old Chief John Eagle had told Lily once when she'd accompanied her father to the tribal council offices. The elderly Native American leader had studied her with eyes nearly as dark as Shadow's. "Our ancestors believed the Bitterroot Peaks protect those with pure hearts. The mountains have a way of revealing truth. Little one, and hiding those who need shelter." Lily hadn't understood his words then. She would soon. What no one in the picturesque town realized was that Michael Reynolds had spent the last 3 years infiltrating the Sanchez Cartel, a ruthless organization that had expanded beyond its Mexican origins to control drug trafficking throughout the Northwest. His evidence had already imprisoned 2 of their lieutenants and seized millions in assets. But Diego Sanchez, the cartel's American-educated leader, remained untouchable behind layers of proxies and alibis. Until now. Michael had hidden something in that cabin, something worth killing for. And as the historic blizzard settled over the Bitterroot Range, sealing off all roads and cutting communication lines, he had miscalculated just one crucial detail. He had never expected to be called away the very weekend Diego Sanchez decided to retrieve his insurance policy. He never expected to leave Lily alone with only Shadow to protect her when the cartel came calling. The morning of February 12th began like the previous 3, since the blizzard had settled in with Lily pressing her small nose against the frosted window pane, watching fresh snow blanket the world in pristine white. Shadow lay at her feet, his black and silver coat a stark contrast to the cabin's warm pine interior. Outside, the wind howled its lonesome song across the mountain ridge, whipping snow into dancing spirals that mesmerized the child. "What do you think? Shadow may be just 5 minutes outside?" Lily whispered, her breath fogging the glass. The German shepherd raised his head, ears perked forward in what she'd come to recognize as cautious agreement. "Dad said short trips only. We'll bundle up extra warm." Lily had learned to be self-sufficient during her father's absences. She layered methodically thermal underwear, wool sweater, insulated snow pants, her mother's 2 large parka that smelled faintly of Sarah's perfume, even after all this time. Shadow watched her preparations with patient eyes, rising only when she reached for his special dog booties designed to protect his paws from ice and hidden sharp objects. "You hate these, I know," she said apologetically, strapping the canvas boots onto his massive paws. "But Dad's rules are Dad's rules." The blast of Arctic air when they stepped onto the porch stole Lily's breath momentarily. Shadow pressed against her leg, steadying her as she regained her composure and adjusted the scarf across her mouth. Snow had drifted nearly 3 feet high against the cabin's north side, transforming familiar landmarks into mysterious white sculptures. They ventured only as far as the large pine 20 yards from the porch, close enough for safety, far enough for the illusion of adventure. Shadow bounded through the drifts, disappearing up to his chest before launching himself forward again, bringing unexpected giggles from Lily. For those brief minutes, she was simply a child playing with her dog in the snow, not the daughter of an FBI agent, not a girl who woke up some nights still calling for her mother. Their playtime was interrupted by the sharp chime of the satellite phone, the emergency line her father had instructed her never to ignore. Lily trudged back to the porch, stomping snow from her boots before answering with the practiced response Michael had drilled into her. "Reynolds' cabin." Lily speaking. "Lily pad." Her father's voice sounded tight, controlled in a way that immediately alerted her something was wrong. "Protocol Blackbird." "Honey. Right now." The playfulness vanished from Lily's expression. Protocol Blackbird meant lockdown. It meant danger. "Dad, what's—" No questions, no delay. "You remember the steps?" The urgency in his voice made her stomach clench. "Yes, sir," she answered, already moving toward the security panel disguised as a thermostat. "I love you. Lily pad. Shadow stays with you. No matter what you hear, what you see, stay in the safe room until I come for you personally. No exceptions. When will—" "I'll try to reach you on the secure line inside 20 minutes max. Blackbird, now, Lily." The line went dead. Lily stood frozen for 3 precious seconds before Shadow's low growl snapped her into action. The German shepherd had positioned himself at the front window, hackles raised, ears forward. He wasn't barking somehow, that seemed worse. With trembling fingers, Lily entered the 6-digit code into the panel. Throughout the cabin, metal shutters silently slid over the windows from the outside, plunging the interior into sudden dimness relieved only by the automatic emergency lights. The main door's reinforced deadbolts engaged with heavy mechanical thunks. "Come on, Shadow," Lily whispered, already heading toward her bedroom. The dog hesitated, still watching the now covered window, before reluctantly following. In her room, Lily pulled the worn copy of Charlotte's Web from the 3rd shelf of her bookcase. There was a soft click, and the entire unit slid sideways, revealing a narrow metal door with a simple keypad. As she punched in her birthday, the code her father had chosen so she would never forget it. Even in panic, Lily felt the familiar tightness in her chest that preceded an asthma attack. She fumbled in her pocket for her inhaler, took a quick puff, and pushed through the narrow entrance with Shadow following close behind. The safe room was small but efficiently designed: a cot, a toilet behind a partition, shelves of supplies, a small monitor showing feeds from cameras positioned around the cabin's exterior. Lily settled on the cot, Shadow pressed protectively against her side, and waited for her father's call on the mounted radio. 5 minutes passed, then 10. At 15 minutes, she heard the sound of an engine, muffled by the storm but unmistakably approaching. Shadow's ears pricked forward, but he made no sound, trained to remain silent in danger. Lily switched between camera feeds, finally catching sight of a dark SUV pushing through snowdrifts toward the cabin's clearing. It shouldn't have been possible. The mountain roads had been impassable for days. These people had come prepared with specialized equipment. 4 men emerged from the vehicle, their faces obscured by ski masks, each carrying what Lily recognized with sickening clarity as assault rifles similar to those her father sometimes brought home. She felt a surge of gratitude for Protocol Blackbird as they approached the cabin's front door without the metal shutters and reinforced locks. They would already be inside. The radio remained silent. 20 minutes had long passed. The leader of the group made a circular motion with his hand, and the men spread out, surrounding the cabin. Lily switched feeds frantically, watching as one man set something against the back door. She covered her ears just in time. The explosion was muffled by the safe room's walls, but still jarring enough to make her gasp. Shadow pressed closer, a low rumble building in his chest. Through the monitor, Lily watched the men enter her home. They moved with military precision, checking corners, communicating with hand signals. These weren't ordinary criminals. The leader removed his mask, revealing a handsome face with a neatly trimmed beard and cold eyes that surveyed the cabin methodically. He spoke into a radio of his own. "No sign of Reynolds. Looks like the place is empty. Beginning search pattern Alpha." Lily's breath caught painfully in her throat. She recognized that voice from somewhere, a memory she couldn't quite place. Her fingers tightened in Shadow's fur as the men began tearing apart the cabin, flipping furniture, slashing cushions, pulling books from shelves. The tightness in her chest intensified. Lily reached for her inhaler again, only to realize with horror that in her rush to reach the safe room, she'd left it in her coat pocket, the coat now hanging on a hook in the living room, in full view of the intruders. As if sensing her distress, Shadow looked up at her with intelligent eyes, then at the sealed door. They were safe for now, but Lily knew her medication wouldn't last forever. Sooner or later, she would have to face what awaited beyond that door. 2 hours into the invasion, Lily's chest had begun to tighten dangerously. Each breath came shallower than the last. The familiar but terrifying sensation of drowning in open air creeping over her. Shadow sensed her distress, pressing his warm body closer, occasionally whining softly when she wheezed. On the monitor, she watched the men methodically destroying her home, tearing up floorboards, emptying drawers, slicing open mattresses. "They're looking for something," she whispered to Shadow, trying to distract herself from her worsening condition. "Something Dad hid." The man with the neat beard, clearly the leader, was examining the bookcase in her father's study, running his fingers along each shelf. Another man with a snake tattoo winding up his neck was in the kitchen, checking inside the freezer, behind appliances. In her bedroom, a wiry-looking man with a limp was pulling stuffing from her beloved teddy bears, dropping their empty husks to the floor without a second glance. The fourth man had remained mostly in the background, his face still partially covered by a neck gaiter. Unlike the others, he seemed reluctant to damage things unnecessarily. When the leader wasn't looking, this man carefully set Lily's framed photo of her mother on the table instead of letting it crash to the floor with the other items. There was something oddly familiar about the way he moved. Lily tried the emergency radio again, desperately hoping to hear her father's voice. Nothing but static responded. Her vision began to blur slightly at the edges, a warning sign she recognized all too well. "I need my inhaler. Shadow," she whispered, her voice strained. "We have to get it." The dog's ears pricked forward, his eyes intense as if understanding every word. Lily studied the monitors, calculating. Her blue winter coat hung on the hook by the front door. The leader and snake tattoo man were in her father's study. The wiry man had moved to the bathroom. Only the fourth man was in the main living area, and he appeared to be alone for the moment. As Lily watched, this fourth man glanced up at one of the hidden cameras, not directly at it, but close enough to make her breath catch. He then moved to the coat rack and, with his back to the rest of the cabin, slipped his hand into the pocket of her blue parka. For a terrible moment, Lily thought he was taking her inhaler, Instead, he seemed to be checking if it was there. The man spoke, his voice barely audible through the monitors. "Diego, come look at this map in the office. Might be important." The leader, Diego, and Snake Tattoo both moved toward the office, leaving the main room momentarily empty. The fourth man glanced up again, then deliberately dropped something small on the floor near the coat rack before joining the others. "He knows I'm watching," Lily realized with a jolt. "But how could he—" Her racing thoughts were interrupted by a sudden bout of coughing that doubled her over. Shadow jumped from the cot, pawing at the safe room door, his intent clear. Lily fought to catch her breath, the room spinning slightly. She had perhaps minutes before a full-blown attack, and the spare inhaler in the safe room supplies had expired last year. Her father had meant to replace it on this very trip. With trembling fingers, Lily entered the exit code. The heavy door slid open silently. Shadow immediately slipped out, belly low to the ground, moving with a stealth that belied his size. Lily hesitated at the threshold, torn between safety and necessity. Another painful constriction in her chest decided for her. She followed Shadow into her bedroom, crouching low as she'd practiced during her father's security drills. The dog led the way, pausing at each doorway to listen before proceeding. They reached the main room without detection, the voices of the men still coming from her father's study, arguing about something in Spanish. "No está aquí. Estamos perdiendo el tiempo." The leader's voice, frustrated. "Tenemos que revisar el cobertizo también." This from Snake Tattoo. "El jefe dijo que estaría en la casa." The wiry man sounded doubtful. Lily crept toward the coat rack, her lungs burning. Just as her fingers closed around the inhaler in her pocket, she heard a voice directly behind her. The fourth man had silently returned to the main room. "I know someone's watching us. Show yourself now, and nobody gets hurt." Shadow spun, positioning himself between Lily and the threat. A growl building deep in his chest. Lily clutched her inhaler, frozen in terror, as the man took a step forward. The light fell across his face as he lowered his gaiter, and Lily's world tilted on its axis. She knew those eyes, that jawline, the small scar through the right eyebrow. He looked older, harder, but unmistakably familiar from the photos that still sat on their mantel at home. "Uncle Jimmy," she gasped, the shock momentarily overriding her fear. James Reynolds, her father's brother, supposedly dead for over 3 years, stared at her with equal shock. "Lily, what the hell are you doing here? Where's Michael?" Before she could answer, Shadow lunged forward with a snarl, teeth bared. In one fluid motion, Jimmy stepped back and closed the door to the hallway, separating them from the other men. "Call off your dog," he hissed. "Now, Shadow, stand down." Lily managed between wheezes, finally raising her inhaler to take a desperate puff. The medication flooded her constricted airways, bringing immediate but temporary relief. "You need to hide," Jimmy whispered urgently. "These men will kill you without a second thought. I can't protect you if they know you're here." "You're supposed to be dead," Lily replied, clutching her inhaler like a lifeline. "Dad said you died in Afghanistan." A flicker of something pain-guilt crossed Jimmy's weathered face. "It's complicated, Lily, but right now, you need to—" "Con quién estás hablando?" "Jimmy." Diego's voice called from the hallway, footsteps approaching. In one swift movement, Jimmy pushed Lily toward the kitchen and jerked his head toward the pantry. "Hide. Now!" Shadow hesitated, looking between Lily and Jimmy, clearly torn between protecting her and attacking this threat. Lily grabbed the dog's collar and pulled him into the walk-in pantry just as the door from the hallway opened. "Thought I heard voices," Diego said, suspicion evident in his tone. "Just swearing at this fucking cold," Jimmy replied casually. "Found anything yet?" Through the slats in the pantry door, Lily watched the two men, holding her breath. Diego studied her uncle for a long moment before answering. "Nothing yet, but Reynolds was too careful to hide it somewhere obvious. We keep looking every inch of this place." "The storm's getting worse," Jimmy remarked. "If we don't find it soon, we might get trapped up here." "We're not leaving without that flash drive," Diego snapped. "Your brother has taken enough from me. I won't let him take me down too." As they moved back toward the hallway, Lily's gaze fell on something tucked into the back of a lower shelf, a small red light blinking steadily behind the flour canisters. Her father had shown her his various dead drops around the cabin, places where he sometimes left messages or items for fellow agents. This one, disguised as a power outlet, had never been used before. With trembling fingers, Lily pressed the small indent beside the light. A hidden compartment silently slid open, revealing a sealed envelope with a single word written across it: "Lily pad." Her heart hammering, she grabbed the envelope and shut the compartment just as the wiry man entered the kitchen, heading straight for the refrigerator. Shadow tensed beside her, a low growl building in his throat. "Shh," she breathed against his ear, praying the man wouldn't check the pantry. As his footsteps retreated, Lily realized with growing horror that she and Shadow were now effectively trapped. The safe room lay on the other side of the cabin, past all four intruders. Night was falling outside, bringing plummeting temperatures. And in her hand, she held what these dangerous men were willing to kill for. Outside the pantry window, darkness was swallowing the mountain. The blizzard had intensified, shrieking wind driving horizontal sheets of snow against the cabin. Temperature was dropping rapidly. Lily could feel it even inside, as the heating system struggled against the brutal assault of the elements. With trembling fingers, she carefully opened the envelope her father had hidden. Shadow's warm body pressed protectively against her side. Inside was a folded note and a small metallic object that she recognized as one of her father's encrypted flash drives. Presumably, what these men were tearing apart the cabin to find. The note was written in her father's precise handwriting, "Lily pad." "If you're reading this, I'm sorry I'm not there. Trust your instincts and Shadow. Remember our fishing trip last summer? That special place holds what you might need. Courage, little one. I love you more than anything in this world." Lily closed her eyes, thinking back to their summer at the cabin. They had fished at several spots, but the special place could only mean one location, the hidden cave behind the waterfall where they'd sheltered during an unexpected thunderstorm. Inside that cave, her father had shown her a waterproof emergency cache communication equipment, medical supplies, even a small firearm she was forbidden to touch. But that location was nearly a half-mile from the cabin, through deep snow, in darkness and freezing temperatures. "Impossible," she whispered to Shadow, whose ears twitched in response. "We'd never make it in this storm." From the kitchen, she heard the clink of glass, someone opening a bottle. The men's voices drifted closer. "We've been here for hours," complained the wiry man whom she'd heard called Carlos. "That flash drive isn't here. Jimmy, your brother must have it with him." "Michael doesn't take it off-site," Jimmy replied, his voice tense. "Too risky. It's here somewhere." Maybe the kid knows where it is, suggested the third man, Ray, the one with the snake tattoo. The casual cruelty in his tone made Lily's blood run cold. What kid? Jimmy's voice sharpened. Michael's daughter stays with her grandparents when he's working. There was a moment of silence before Diego spoke. How interesting that you know his custody arrangements. Jimmy, almost like you've been keeping tabs on your supposedly estranged brother. I did my research before taking this job, Jimmy replied evenly. Just like I researched you. Sanchez. The conversation shifted to Spanish, too rapid for Lily to follow with her elementary school knowledge. She clutched the flash drive tightly, mind racing. If these men realized she had what they wanted, she would become either a hostage or a liability. Neither option promised survival. A sudden boom shook the cabin, not an explosion, but the violent collapse of something heavy. Shadow's ears flattened against his skull. Shit. Ray's voice. The snow-collapsed part of the roof in the back bedroom. Seal it off, Diego ordered. We're losing heat. Ray, check the generator. Make sure we don't lose power. Footsteps retreated. Lily shivered, partly from cold, partly from fear. Her mind wandered to last winter, when her father had taught her about surviving extreme cold. Your body is like a candle, he'd explained. Food is your fuel, but you need to conserve your flame. The pantry contained enough food, but the plummeting temperature posed a greater threat. Already her fingers felt stiff. She needed warmer clothing, and she needed to prepare for whatever might come next. We need a plan. Shadow, she whispered. The German shepherd looked at her with those intelligent eyes that sometimes seemed to understand every word. Carefully, she inventoried their resources: the flash drive, her half-full inhaler, a pantry full of non-perishable food, and Shadow himself, a trained rescue dog with remarkable instincts. Not enough to escape 4 armed men in a blizzard, but perhaps enough to survive until help came. If help was coming at all. Her thoughts were interrupted by a strange sound outside the pantry window, a soft scratching, then a low, mournful howl carried on the wind. Shadow's ears shot forward, his posture suddenly alert. He rose silently and pressed his nose to the frosted glass, breath fogging the pain. Through the swirling snow, Lily caught glimpses of movement, shadowy figures circling the cabin. Not men, but animals. Wolves. They moved like liquid darkness through the storm, appearing and disappearing in the snow squalls. Shadow watched them intently, his body vibrating with tension but making no sound. They've come down from the high country, she realized. The storm must be driving them toward shelter. The wolves' presence complicated everything. Even if she could somehow slip past the men inside, she would face a different danger outside. Yet something about Shadow's reaction puzzled her. He showed no aggression toward these wild cousins, only intense interest. A sudden crash from the living room made her jump. Male voices raised in anger, Diego and Jimmy arguing violently in a mixture of English and Spanish. Never should have trusted you. Said I would deliver, and I will, running out of patience. The argument escalated, culminating in the distinctive sound of a fist striking flesh. Lily winced. Though she barely knew her uncle only from old photos and her father's rare wistful mentions, she felt a strange connection to this man who shared her blood, yet allied himself with dangerous criminals. Why had Jimmy lied about recognizing her? Why was he helping these men find evidence that would harm his own brother? The questions swirled in her mind like the snow outside, offering no clear answers. Time passed with excruciating slowness. Lily dozed fitfully, Shadow keeping silent watch. In her troubled sleep, memories blended with present fears, her mother's laugh, her father teaching her to skip stones across the lake. The terrible day the police officers had come to their door with news of her mother's accident. She woke to Shadow's gentle nudge. The dog was staring fixedly at the pantry door. Outside, the cabin had gone quiet, too quiet. Lily pressed her ear to the door but heard nothing, no voices, no movement. Had the men left fallen asleep, or were they silently waiting, having somehow discovered her hiding place? The uncertainty was unbearable. With agonizing slowness, she eased the pantry door open a fraction of an inch. The kitchen was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of emergency lights. Her gaze fell on the digital clock on the microwave, 3:17 a.m. She had been hiding for nearly 6 hours. Shadow slipped through the narrow opening first, his nails silent on the wooden floor. Lily followed, clutching the flash drive in one hand, her inhaler in the other. The main room was empty. The fire in the hearth burned down to embers. Scattered furniture and torn cushions created an obstacle course of destruction. As she crept toward the hallway leading to her bedroom and the safe room beyond, Lily heard muffled voices from her father's study. The men were still searching, their frustration evident even through the closed door. "They don't know I have it," she realized with a mixture of relief and terror. She had nearly reached the hallway when Shadow suddenly froze, hackles rising. Before she could react, a hand closed over her mouth from behind. "Don't scream," Jimmy whispered in her ear, his grip firm but not painful. "I'm not going to hurt you." Shadow spun, teeth bared, but Lily raised her hand in the gesture her father had taught the dog wait. The German shepherd halted his attack but remained poised to launch, eyes never leaving Jimmy's face. "That's quite a dog," Jimmy observed quietly, releasing her. "Now, where is it? Lily, I know Michael would have left it somewhere you could find it." "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, the flash drive burning like a coal in her pocket. Jimmy's weathered face softened slightly. "You look so much like your mom. She was always a terrible liar, too. Eyes give everything away." He glanced nervously toward the study door. "Listen carefully. Those men in there will kill you without hesitation if they find you. The only reason you're still alive is because they don't know you're here." "Thanks to you," Lily said, studying her uncle's face. "You didn't tell them." "I'm not a monster, Lily. Whatever your dad might have told you." A flash of pain crossed his features. "But I am in too deep to just walk away. Give me the drive, and I'll get you safely to town somehow." "Why should I trust you? You're helping them." Jimmy ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like her father's that it made her heart ache. "It's complicated. Your dad and we haven't seen eye to eye in a long time, but I never wanted anyone to get hurt. Then why did you let everyone think you were dead? Dad mourned you. He keeps your picture on our mantle." Something raw and vulnerable flickered in Jimmy's eyes. "That's a story for another time. Right now we need to—" The study door opened. Jimmy reacted instantly, shoving Lily behind the overturned sofa and spinning to face Ray, who emerged into the hallway. "Who are you talking to?" Ray demanded, hand moving to the gun at his waist. "Myself," Jimmy replied smoothly. "Bad habit from too many solo missions." Found anything useful?" Ray's suspicious gaze swept the room, lingering on the shadowy corners. "Nothing yet. Diego wants to check the shed out back at first light. Says if we don't find it by noon tomorrow, we start considering other options." "What other options?" "The kind that involve gasoline and matches," Ray said with a cruel smile. "Cabin accidents happen all the time in blizzards like this." After Ray returned to the study, Jimmy crouched beside the sofa. "You hear that? They'll burn this place down with or without finding what they want. Last chance, Lily, give me the drive." Lily's mind raced. Her options were dwindling with the temperature, which had fallen low enough that she could now see her breath inside the cabin. Shadow pressed against her, offering warmth and support. Through the front window, she caught glimpses of the wolves still circling in the storm, their eyes occasionally reflecting the security lights like ghostly beacons. "If I give it to you," she whispered, "what happens to us? To Dad?" Jimmy's expression darkened. "Your dad made his choices. He knew the risks." "That's not an answer." For a moment, uncle and niece stared at each other, the family resemblance striking despite the decades between them. Finally, Jimmy sighed. "Diego wants the drive because it contains evidence linking him to at least 3 murders, including a federal judge. Your dad has been building this case for years. If that evidence goes public, Diego loses everything. He's desperate. And you're helping him," Lily said. Not a question, but an accusation. "Like I said, it's complicated." Jimmy glanced toward the window. "Those your friends out there, they're wolves. They came down because of the storm." Jimmy frowned. "Strange behavior. Wolves usually avoid human structures completely," as if in response to his words. A chorus of howls rose outside, eerie and plaintive against the storm's constant roar. Shadow's ears twitched, but he remained focused on protecting Lily. "Look," Jimmy said urgently, "I can create a distraction. Get everyone focused on the shed for a while. That might give you a chance to reach that safe room. I'm guessing this place has... Michael always was paranoid about security." "Why would you help me?" Jimmy's gaze dropped. "Because whatever else I've done, whatever choices I've made, you're still my blood. Sarah would never forgive me if I let anything happen to you." The mention of her mother's name sent a shock through Lily. "You knew my mom better than your father realizes," Jimmy replied cryptically. "Now listen carefully. In about 10 minutes, there's going to be a lot of commotion outside. When that happens, make for your safe room and stay there until help comes." "What if help doesn't come?" Jimmy looked at her for a long moment. "Your father always comes through, Lily. It's the one thing I've always counted on and resented him for." He stood, checking to ensure the study door remained closed. "Keep that dog close, and whatever happens, I'm sorry it came to this." Before she could respond, Jimmy slipped away toward the kitchen. Lily remained behind the sofa, heart hammering in her chest, the flash drive clutched in her small fist. Shadow settled beside her, alert and watchful, occasionally glancing toward the windows where the wolves continued their silent vigil in the storm. In the distance, Lily heard the generator sputter briefly before resuming its steady hum. The cabin's emergency lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. Outside, the wind's pitch changed, dropping to a low, ominous moan that seemed to resonate through the walls themselves. She thought of her father's note, the cave behind the waterfall, the emergency supplies. She thought of her uncle's contradictions protecting her while endangering her father. And she thought of her mother, whose death suddenly felt connected to all of this in ways she couldn't yet understand. Shadow's ears suddenly pricked forward. A second later, Lily heard it too, a new sound cutting through the storm's constant roar, the unmistakable growl of snowmobile engines approaching from the north. The snowmobile engines triggered an immediate reaction throughout the cabin. Diego burst from the study, barking orders in rapid Spanish. Ray and Carlos grabbed their weapons, taking defensive positions at the windows. Jimmy appeared from the kitchen, his expression unreadable as he peered through a crack in the metal shutters. "4 machines," he reported, "coming in fast from the ridge trail." "Your brother?" Diego demanded, checking the ammunition in his handgun. Jimmy shook his head. "Michael wouldn't bring a team up in these conditions. Too risky." "Then who?" Ray's finger hovered near his trigger. "Mountain rescue, maybe," Carlos suggested. "Or local rangers checking cabins after the roof collapse." Diego's face hardened. "Whoever they are, they can't find us here. Ray." Carlos, prepare to intercept. "Jimmy, gather everything we need. We're leaving as soon as we deal with our visitors." From her hiding place behind the sofa, Lily watched in silent terror. The approaching snowmobiles might mean rescue, or they might bring more danger. Either way, the cartel members were preparing for violence. She needed to move, to reach her father's safe room before the situation exploded into chaos. Shadow sensed her intention, muscles tensing in preparation. Lily waited until the men were focused on the approaching lights, then began inching backward toward the hallway. 1 step, 2, 3. The old floorboard near the hall entrance creaked beneath her weight. Carlos spun toward the sound, raising his weapon. "What was that?" "Probably just the cabin settling," Jimmy said quickly. "These old places make all kinds of noises in the cold." Carlos narrowed his eyes, unconvinced. "I'll check." As the man started toward her hiding place, Lily froze, heart hammering so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. Carlos was 3 steps away when Diego suddenly shouted from the window, "They're stopping at the shed, first move, now." The momentary distraction was all Jimmy needed. He bumped into Carlos, redirecting him toward the kitchen. "We should watch the back exit, too." Shadow used the diversion to slip silently into the hallway, Lily following like a shadow herself. They had nearly reached her bedroom door when the first gunshots shattered the night-sharp cracks that echoed across the mountainside. "What the hell?" Ray's voice rose in confusion. "There's no one on those machines." Outside, the snowmobiles had stopped in a semicircle about 50 yards from the cabin, headlights blazing through the swirling snow, but no riders were visible. The engines continued idling, exhaust plumes rising into the storm like ghostly fingers. Jimmy appeared in the hallway behind Lily, his eyes widening at finding her still exposed. "Run," he mouthed silently, gesturing urgently toward her bedroom. She didn't need to be told twice, with Shadow at her heels. Lily sprinted the final few steps and slipped inside her room, pulling the door closed behind her. The hidden safe room entrance still stood open from her earlier escape, a black rectangular void in the wall beside her destroyed bookcase. Outside, more gunfire erupted, accompanied by shouts of confusion. Whatever distraction the snowmobiles had created was working for now. Lily darted across her room, Shadow matching her step for step, when a violent fit of coughing doubled her over. The stress, the cold, the exertion, her asthma was flaring dangerously again. She fumbled for her inhaler, taking another precious dose. The medication helped, but she could feel her airways beginning to resist its effects. Her condition was worsening. Another severe attack could be fatal without proper medical intervention. As she straightened, her bedroom door burst open. Diego stood in the doorway, his handsome face twisted with rage as he took in the sight of the small girl and her dog. "So Reynolds left his daughter behind," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "How convenient." Shadow moved with explosive force, lunging toward the cartel leader with bared teeth and a ferocity Lily had never witnessed. Diego fired once, the bullet missing the dog by inches as Shadow slammed into his chest, sending both man and weapon crashing to the floor. "Run, Lily!" Jimmy's voice came from somewhere in the hallway. "Get to the safe room!" Diego fought furiously against Shadow's powerful jaws, which had clamped onto his forearm. Blood seeped through his sleeve as he struggled to reach his fallen gun with his free hand. The German Shepherd's training was evident in his precise attack, disabling without killing, maintaining control of his target. Lily backed toward the safe room entrance, torn between escape and concern for Shadow. From the front of the cabin came more gunfire and shouting. Ray and Carlos were fully engaged with whatever threat the snowmobiles presented. Just as her back touched the metal frame of the safe room entrance, Jimmy appeared in the doorway, his own weapon drawn. He took in the scene in an instant, Diego struggling beneath the dog, Lily on the verge of escape. "Go, Lily," he commanded. "I've got this." Diego managed to kick Shadow hard enough to create momentary separation, scrambling for his weapon. "Traitor!" he spat at Jimmy. "I knew we couldn't trust you." Jimmy raised his gun, aiming at Diego. "It's over. The evidence is already gone, transmitted to the FBI hours ago." Lily gasped. "That's not true. I have the—" "Shut up, Lily." Jimmy cut her off with desperate intensity. "Get in that room and lock the door." Understanding dawned slowly through her fear. Jimmy was lying to protect her, to keep Diego from knowing she carried the actual evidence. She backed into the safe room just as Diego lunged for his weapon. 2 gunshots exploded in the confined space of her bedroom, the sound deafening. Shadow yelped in pain. Jimmy staggered backward, red blossoming across his shoulder. Diego rose, weapon trained on Jimmy's chest, his breathing ragged. "Where's the drive, Reynolds?" Diego demanded. "Tell me, or I put the next one through your heart." "Gone," Jimmy gasped, pressing his hand against his bleeding shoulder. "Michael sent it out with one of his agents days ago. You're hunting ghosts." Diego's face contorted with fury. "Then you've outlived your usefulness." He shifted his aim toward Shadow, who lay whimpering on the floor, a patch of red staining his silver-black coat. "Starting with this mutt." "No!" Lily screamed, lunging forward instinctively to protect her dog. Time seemed to slow as multiple events collided. Diego swung his weapon toward Lily's movement. Jimmy threw himself forward with a roar of rage. And through the bedroom window came an explosive crash of breaking glass and splintering wood as something massive burst through from outside. The window frame disintegrated as a full-grown wolf landed in the bedroom, followed immediately by a second and third. The temperature plummeted as wind and snow gusted through the shattered opening. Diego fired wildly, bullets embedding themselves in walls and furniture as the wolves launched themselves toward him with savage purpose. Jimmy grabbed Lily, dragging her backward into the safe room as Diego's screams filled the air. Shadow, despite his injury, managed to limp after them, collapsing once inside. With shaking hands, Jimmy slammed the metal door shut, the locking mechanisms engaging automatically. In the sudden silence of the safe room, Lily could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Jimmy slid down the wall, leaving a crimson streak behind him, his face ashen. "Shadow," Lily whispered, kneeling beside her dog. The bullet had grazed his hind leg, painful but not life-threatening. She stroked his head as he whined softly. "Smart dog," Jimmy managed through gritted teeth. "Trained better than most agents I've worked with." "You're bleeding badly," Lily observed, her child's voice unnaturally calm in the face of such trauma. She moved to the supply shelves, retrieving the first aid kit her father had shown her during previous safety drills. Jimmy watched her with a mixture of pain and admiration. "You're a lot like your dad. You know, cool under pressure." He winced as she helped him remove his jacket, revealing the gunshot wound beneath. "Though I'm pretty sure Michael wouldn't be patching me up right now." "Why did you help them?" Lily asked, carefully cleaning the wound as her father had taught her during wilderness survival lessons. "Why did you let everyone think you were dead?" Jimmy's laugh was bitter. "That's a long story, kiddo. One I'm not sure I'll get to finish." He nodded toward the monitors showing camera feeds from around the cabin. "Look!" On the screens, chaos reigned. Wolves, at least 6 of them, had somehow entered the cabin. Ray lay motionless near the front door, his throat torn out. Carlos was nowhere to be seen. Diego had managed to barricade himself in the kitchen, firing occasionally at shadows moving beyond the doorway. "I don't understand," Lily whispered, watching the surreal scene unfold. "Wolves don't attack people like this. They avoid humans whenever possible." "These aren't avoiding anything," Jimmy observed grimly. "It's like they're hunting." Shadow had dragged himself to his feet, limping to the monitor wall where he watched the wolf pack with intense focus, ears erect, occasionally whining softly as if responding to the movements on screen. "They came when Shadow was hurt," Lily realized suddenly. "Like they knew. Like they were protecting him. Protecting us." As if confirming her words, one of the largest wolves on the screen stopped in the hallway outside her bedroom, turning to stare directly into the camera. Its eyes glowed with an intelligence that sent shivers down Lily's spine. The temperature in the safe room was dropping rapidly as the cabin's heating system failed, the broken window allowing in the full fury of the blizzard. Lily's breath formed visible clouds with each exhalation. Jimmy's face had grown alarmingly pale, his wound still seeping blood despite the pressure bandage. "We can't stay here," he said weakly. "Heat's failing. You'll freeze before morning." "We can't go out there either," Lily countered, gesturing to the monitors where wolves still prowled the cabin interior. Jimmy's eyes drifted to Shadow, who continued his strange communion with the wolves on screen. "Maybe we don't have to worry about them," he murmured. "Your dog seems to have some unusual friends." Before Lily could respond, a new sound penetrated the safe room walls, the rhythmic thump of helicopter blades cutting through the storm above the mountain. On the external camera feeds, powerful searchlights swept the clearing, illuminating the abandoned snowmobiles and the cabin's snow-covered roof. "That's a Black Hawk," Jimmy stated, professional assessment momentarily overriding his pain. "Military grade. Your dad called in some serious favors." Lily's heart leapt with hope, even as Diego's desperate face appeared on one of the monitors. The cartel leader had emerged from the kitchen, making a frantic dash for the front door. Wolves in pursuit. He fired behind him as he ran, then disappeared from view as he burst outside into the storm. "He's going to try to reach the helicopter," Jimmy warned. "If he gets to them first, tells them he's a survivor needing rescue." The implications hung in the frozen air between them. Diego might escape. Worse, he might convince the rescue team that he was the victim, potentially endangering the rescuers and eliminating witnesses. Shadow suddenly barked a sharp, commanding sound that made both humans jump. He was staring at the small ventilation shaft in the corner of the safe room, tail wagging with purpose. "What is it, boy?" Lily asked, following his gaze. The dog barked again, limping to the shaft and pawing at its cover. Jimmy struggled to his feet, swaying slightly from blood loss. "That shaft leads to the roof," he said. "Too small for an adult, but maybe big enough for me." Lily finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. Jimmy nodded grimly. "Diego's going to reach that helicopter before they can secure the area. Someone needs to warn them who they're dealing with." Lily looked at the shaft, then at Shadow's injured leg, then at her uncle's bloody shoulder. The choices before her were all impossible. Stay and potentially freeze. Leave and face wolves, armed criminals, and a raging blizzard. From outside came the distinctive sound of more gunfire, Diego making his desperate bid for freedom. The helicopter searchlight swept closer to the cabin. Time was running out. The ventilation shaft was narrower than Lily had anticipated, its metal sides scraping against her shoulders as she inched upward. Each movement sent clouds of dust into her face, threatening to trigger another asthma attack. She clutched her inhaler between her teeth, the flash drive secure in her pocket, as she pushed against the bitter cold of the metal shaft. "Keep going!" Jimmy's voice echoed from below, growing fainter as she ascended. "The exit hatch should be about 6 feet up. Push hard, it might be frozen shut." Behind her, Shadow whined pitifully, his injured leg preventing him from following. Leaving him had been the hardest part of this desperate plan. The dog had resisted, trying to drag himself after her despite his wound, until Jimmy had physically restrained him. "I'll take care of him," her uncle had promised, though his own injury made such assurances hollow. "Just reach that helicopter. Tell them who you are. Tell them Diego Sanchez is not to be trusted." The ventilation shaft made a sharp turn, forcing Lily to contort her small body. Her fingers, already numb from cold, scraped against a metal grate above her head. The exit. She pushed upward with all her strength, but the grate refused to budge, sealed by ice and snow. "It's stuck," she called down, panic rising in her chest. "Use your body weight," Jimmy instructed, his voice faint. "Push with your shoulders and back, not just your arms." Lily repositioned herself, bracing her back against one side of the shaft and her feet against the other, then pushed upward with every ounce of strength her 8-year-old frame could muster. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then, with a screech of protesting metal and a shower of ice crystals, the grate gave way. Arctic air blasted into the shaft, so cold it burned her lungs. Lily gasped, immediately triggering a spasm in her airways. She fumbled the inhaler from between her teeth, took a desperate puff, and forced herself to keep moving despite the invisible vice tightening around her chest. She emerged onto the cabin's roof like a small, shivering animal birthed into a hostile world. The storm's fury was unleashed around her without the cabin walls to muffle its rage. Wind threatened to tear her from her precarious perch, driving needle-sharp snow against any exposed skin. Visibility extended barely 10 feet in any direction. The world beyond dissolved into a howling white void. The helicopter's searchlights cut through the blizzard intermittently, creating momentary islands of visibility before being swallowed again by the storm. Lily crawled toward the edge of the roof, her hands and knees instantly numb against the ice-coated surface. Below, shadowy figures moved through the snow, the helicopter team deploying around the cabin. But 100 yards away, illuminated briefly by a sweeping searchlight, another figure struggled through the deep drifts toward the aircraft. Diego. "No," Lily whispered, her words instantly torn away by the wind. She had to reach the helicopter team first, had to warn them, drawing what little breath her constricted lungs would allow. She shouted into the storm, "Help up here! Help me!" The wind consumed her cries. No one looked up. The cold was seeping deeper now, past her skin, into her bones, into her very core. Each breath came shorter than the last as her asthma and the cold conspired against her. A sudden movement caught her eye, something large emerging from the broken bedroom window below. A wolf, its dark coat matted with snow and blood. It paused, raising its massive head to look directly at her on the roof, yellow eyes gleaming with unnatural intelligence. Then it threw back its head and howled a sound so powerful it cut through even the storm's constant roar. Other wolves emerged from the cabin, joining the first. Their combined howls created a primal chorus that sent shivers down Lily's spine. The helicopter searchlights swung toward the sound, illuminating the pack and Lily on the roof above them. There, a human voice carried faintly through the storm. "On the roof. There's someone on the roof." The searchlight fixed on her position, blinding in its intensity. Lily raised a hand to shield her eyes, trying to call out again, but her voice had abandoned her, her lungs refusing to supply enough air for speech. The world began to spin sickeningly as oxygen deprivation took its toll. "I'm falling," she realized with strange detachment. Her body tilted forward, gravity claiming her as the roof's edge approached with terrible finality. The impact she expected never came. Instead, something caught her coat from behind, arresting her fall with a violent jerk. Through dimming vision, she turned to see Shadow, somehow having forced his injured body through the ventilation shaft. His powerful jaws clamped around her parka's hood. "Shadow," she whispered, reaching for him with a trembling hand. The dog dragged her backward from the edge with the last of his strength, then collapsed beside her, breathing heavily, blood from his reopened wound staining the snow beneath them. Lily gathered him in her arms, no longer feeling the cold. A dangerous warmth spreading through her body, the final deception of hypothermia. "We tried." "Shadow," she murmured, burying her face in his fur. "We tried?" As consciousness began to fade, Lily became aware of new sounds penetrating the storm's constant barrage, voices shouting commands, the mechanical whine of equipment, and the steady beating of helicopter blades holding position against the punishing winds. "I've got you," an unfamiliar voice said suddenly. Strong arms lifted her from the roof's icy surface. "Stay with me, little one. Stay with me." "Shadow," she managed to whisper, refusing to release her grip on the dog's fur. "We've got him too," the voice assured her. "Just hold on." The world dissolved into a series of disconnected images and sensations being lowered from the roof in a harness. Bright lights, the helicopter's deafening roar, oxygen masks, blankets, and Shadow. Always Shadow, somehow kept beside her despite the rescuer's protocols. Time slipped and jumped erratically. She was in the helicopter, its interior blessedly warm, machines beeping, people working over her and shadow both. Out the window, she caught a glimpse of the cabin below. Flames now visible through the broken windows despite the storm, Diego's final act of destruction. "Jimmy," she tried to say through the oxygen mask. "My uncle's inside, in the safe room." Whether anyone understood her muffled words, she couldn't tell. Darkness claimed her before she could try again. She drifted back to consciousness in what seemed like another world, a hospital room, sterile and quiet, except for the soft beeping of monitors. The pressure in her chest had eased, replaced by the familiar sensation of nebulized medication opening her airways. An IV snaked into her arm, and thermal blankets cocooned her still cold body. Lily. A voice she would know anywhere, her father's. Michael Reynolds's face appeared above her, haggard and unshaven, his eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion or tears or both. "Can you hear me, Lily Pad?" "Dad," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "Shadow." Michael shifted, revealing a makeshift bed on the floor beside her, where Shadow lay heavily bandaged but alert, his tail thumping weakly against the tile when he saw her looking at him. "He's going to be okay," her father assured her, taking her small hand in his. "The bullet just grazed him. He's lost some blood, and he'll need time to heal. But the vet says he'll make a full recovery." He squeezed her hand gently. "He refused to leave your side, even when they were treating him. The staff finally gave up and brought him here." Lily managed a faint smile. Then the memory of the cabin and its other occupant crashed back. Jimmy, Dad, Uncle Jimmy was in the safe room. He was shot. The cabin was on fire when we left. Michael's face hardened, pain etching new lines around his mouth. "I know, sweetheart." "Did they get him out? Is he—" Her father looked away, unable to meet her eyes. "They found him. But he'd lost a lot of blood. The medical team did everything they could." The full meaning of his words took a moment to penetrate Lily's fog of medication and exhaustion. When it did, tears welled in her eyes. "He saved us. Dad, Shadow, and me. He turned against the bad men to help us." Michael nodded, his jaw tight. "That sounds like Jimmy. Always waiting until the last possible moment to do the right thing." There was bitterness in his voice, but also a profound grief that Lily had only heard once before when her mother died. "Diego, the man in charge, he said Jimmy was a traitor. He shot him." Lily's lower lip trembled. "I thought Uncle Jimmy was already dead. You said he died years ago." Her father sighed heavily, stroking her hair back from her forehead. "It's complicated. Lily Pad, Jimmy and we haven't seen each other in a long time. Not since before your mom died. There are things you don't know, things I should have told you." "He knew Mom," Lily said. "He said he knew her better than you realized." Something flashed in Michael's eyes. Pain, anger, too complex for Lily to decipher in her weakened state. "Yes," he said finally. "He did." A nurse entered the room, checking Lily's vitals with brisk efficiency. "She needs rest," the woman told Michael firmly. "Doctor's orders. You can continue your reunion when she's stronger." Michael nodded reluctantly. "I'll be right outside," he promised Lily. "Shadow will stay with you." as if understanding. The German shepherd raised his head, eyes fixed on Lily with watchful devotion despite his own pain. Michael bent to kiss Lily's forehead, then moved toward the door. "Dad," Lily called after him, suddenly remembering. "The flash drive." "It's in my coat pocket. That's what they were looking for." Her father stopped, turning back with an unreadable expression. "I know, Lily. We found it." "Did you catch Diego?" "He was trying to reach the helicopter. We caught him," Michael confirmed, his voice flat. "He won't hurt anyone ever again." There was something in his tone that sent a chill through Lily despite the thermal blankets, something cold and final that reminded her of the mountain wolves' merciless efficiency. Before she could ask more questions, the nurse shooed her father from the room, adjusting medications that pulled Lily back toward sleep. As consciousness began to fade again, she reached down to place her hand on Shadow's head. The dog whined softly, nuzzling against her palm. "We made it," she whispered, as the medication swept her away. "We survived." But even as she drifted into drug-induced slumber, questions lingered at the edges of her mind about her uncle's cryptic words regarding her mother, about the wolves' unnatural behavior, about her father's grim certainty regarding Diego's fate. The cabin had burned, taking its secrets with it. But some truths, Lily sensed, had survived the flames, truths that would change her understanding of her family forever. 3 days passed in a blur of medical examinations, police interviews, and fitful sleep interrupted by nightmares of wolves and gunfire. Lily's hospital room became a revolving door of federal agents, physicians, and psychologists all trying, in their adult ways, to make sense of what had happened in that mountain cabin. Shadow remained her constant companion, his protective presence secured by her father's FBI credentials and the hospital administrator's begrudging exception to their "no animals" policy. On the 4th morning, Lily woke to find her room empty of the usual parade of clipboard-wielding professionals. Only her father occupied the visitor's chair, his tall frame hunched forward, elbows resting on his knees as he studied something in his hands. It took her a moment to recognize the object, a battered silver pocket watch she hadn't seen in years. "That was Uncle Jimmy's," she said quietly. Michael's head jerked up, his expression momentarily unguarded grief and something darker swimming in his eyes before he composed himself. "You're awake. How are you feeling? Lily pad. Better?" It wasn't entirely true. Her chest still ached from the strain of her severe asthma attack, and the doctors had warned it would be weeks before her respiratory system fully recovered. But the persistent fog of medication had lifted enough for clarity to return. "They found it, the watch." Her father nodded, turning the timepiece over in his hands. "Recovery team found it in the safe room. Most everything else was destroyed in the fire, but this survived." He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Jimmy always did have a knack for leaving pieces of himself behind." Shadow lifted his head from his spot beside Lily's bed, ears perked toward the door seconds before it opened. A woman entered mid-40s, with sharp eyes and the unmistakable bearing of law enforcement. She nodded to Michael before addressing Lily. "Good morning, Lily. I'm Agent Wilson Cathy. I work with your dad." Her smile seemed more genuine than most of the adults who'd questioned Lily so far. "How would you feel about taking a short walk with me? The doctors say it would be good for you to move around a bit." Lily glanced at her father, who nodded encouragement. Shadow can come too. Of course, Agent Wilson replied. I'd feel safer with him along. Frankly. 20 minutes later, Lily found herself in a small hospital garden, enclosed by glass walls that allowed winter sunlight to filter through without exposing patients to Montana's brutal February temperatures. Shadow limped protectively at her side, his bandaged leg healing but still tender. Agent Wilson led them to a secluded bench beside a small indoor fountain. "Your dad asked me to talk with you," she said once they were seated. "There are things he thinks you should know, but they're difficult for him to say." Lily studied the woman's face, seeing kinship with her father in the direct gaze and steady presence. "About Uncle Jimmy." "Yes? And about your mother?" Agent Wilson paused, choosing her words carefully. "What you experienced in that cabin was the end of a story that began long before you were born. Your father thinks you deserve to know the whole truth, or as much of it as you can understand at your age." The fountain's gentle burbling filled the silence as Lily absorbed this. "Dad said Jimmy died in Afghanistan, but he was alive. He was working with those bad men." Agent Wilson nodded. "Jimmy Reynolds did serve in Afghanistan, but he didn't die there. After his discharge, he worked as a contractor for various security firms, including some with questionable clients. Your father lost track of him for several years, during which time rumors circulated that Jimmy had been killed on a private mission in South America. But he wasn't dead. No, about 4 years ago. Your father recognized Jimmy in surveillance photos from an operation tracking the Sanchez cartel. He was working as Diego Sanchez's right-hand man, providing security and military expertise." She paused. "Your father was devastated. He'd grieved for his brother, only to discover Jimmy had chosen to use his skills for a criminal organization." Shadow shifted position, laying his head on Lily's lap as if sensing her distress. She stroked his ears absently. "But why did Dad tell me Jimmy was dead if he knew he wasn't?" "To protect you," Agent Wilson said simply. "And because, in many ways, the brother he knew was dead. The man working for Sanchez wasn't the Jimmy Reynolds your father grew up with." The explanation made a certain child's sense to Lily, though it carried the bittersweet tang of adult compromise. "Did Jimmy know about me before the cabin? Agent Wilson's expression softened. "Yes, he did. In fact, part of the reason your father was able to track the Sanchez organization so effectively was because Jimmy occasionally passed information to him anonymously through channels only they would recognize. We believe he was trying, in his own way, to protect you and your father while maintaining his cover with Sanchez." "A double agent," Lily said, recalling the term from spy movies her father sometimes watched. "Something like that, though far less organized or official." Agent Wilson shifted slightly. "Which brings us to the more difficult part of this story. Your mother." A familiar ache bloomed in Lily's chest at the mention of Sarah Reynolds, a pain distinct from her asthma, though no less constricting. "Mom died in a car accident. Dad said her brakes failed on mountain roads." Agent Wilson took a deep breath. "That was the official report. Yes, but evidence has emerged suggesting it wasn't an accident at all. The flash drive you recovered from the cabin contained files proving that Diego Sanchez ordered the sabotage of your mother's car." The world seemed to tilt beneath Lily. Shadow whined, pressing closer to her as if to anchor her against this new reality. "Mom was murdered. But why would they hurt her? She was just a photographer." She was more than that. Lily. Your mother worked with your father on several of his operations, using her photography business as cover to document criminal activities. The last project they worked on together involved gathering evidence against Sanchez's operation in the Northwest. Lily's mind reeled with this revelation. Her gentle, laughing mother, who taught her to see beauty in unexpected places, a secret agent. The notion seemed impossible to reconcile with her memories. There's more, Agent Wilson continued quietly. The files also contained evidence suggesting that Jimmy may have been involved in planning the sabotage, though it appears he didn't know the target was your mother until after the fact. When he discovered what had happened, he began feeding information to your father partly out of guilt, partly out of a desire for redemption. Tears welled in Lily's eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. Shadow raised his head, licking her hand in canine concern. So Uncle Jimmy helped kill Mom, then tried to make up for it by betraying the bad men. Agent Wilson placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. Human motivations are rarely simple, Lily. Jimmy made terrible choices, but in his final moments, he chose to protect you at the cost of his own life. The medical examiner confirmed he could have escaped the cabin if he'd left you behind. Instead, he stayed to help you, knowing it meant certain death when his wound and the fire overtook him. Lily remembered Jimmy's pale face as he'd boosted her into the ventilation shaft, his hands steady despite the blood soaking his shirt. His last words echoed in her memory. Tell Michael I'm sorry for everything, but especially for Sarah. In the safe room, she said slowly. Jimmy was dying from his gunshot wound. He made me promise to tell Dad he was sorry about Mom. He said, she hesitated, the memory clarifying. He said to tell Dad that he didn't know it was her until it was too late, and that he'd been trying to make things right ever since. Agent Wilson nodded. The evidence supports that. Diego kept his people compartmentalized. Most didn't know what the others were doing. Jimmy likely thought he was arranging an intimidation tactic against a federal witness, not a murder, and certainly not against his brother's wife. Does Dad believe that? The agent's hesitation told Lily everything. Your father is struggling with it. Grief and betrayal make for a complicated mix of emotions. Lily wiped her tears with the sleeve of her hospital gown, considering this new reality where her mother had been murdered, her uncle both villain and final protector. There's something else, she said eventually. The wolves. They helped us. They attacked the bad men but left Shadow and me alone. That's not normal. Is it? A shadow passed over Agent Wilson's face. No, it's not. The wildlife experts we've consulted are baffled by their behavior. 4 adult gray wolves entered the cabin through broken windows and systematically attacked Sanchez's men while avoiding you and Shadow entirely. It's unprecedented. Shadow knew them somehow, Lily insisted. He was communicating with them through the window before they came in. Agent Wilson's professional demeanor slipped slightly, revealing genuine bewilderment. There's a local Blackfeet legend about spirit wolves protecting innocent souls on the mountain. But, she shook her head, science can't explain what happened that night. What matters is that you and Shadow survived. A new voice joined their conversation. Some things aren't meant to be explained by science. Lily looked up to find her father approaching, accompanied by an elderly Native American man, whom she recognized from visits to the tribal offices, Chief John Eagle, his weathered face solemn beneath a black cowboy hat. The bitter root has its own justice, the old man continued, settling onto the bench beside Lily. The mountains protect those worthy of protection. Michael remained standing, his posture stiff with barely contained emotion. Chief Eagle insisted on seeing you. Lily, he's been worried. The elderly man smiled gently. The spirits speak highly of your courage, little one. Few children, few adults, even would have shown such strength in the face of such darkness. Under normal circumstances, Lily might have dismissed such talk as the kind of mystical nonsense adults sometimes offered children, but after what she'd witnessed on the mountain, the old man's words resonated with a truth she felt in her bones. What happened to Diego? She asked, suddenly, turning to her father. You said you caught him. Michael and Agent Wilson exchanged glances. It was Chief Eagle who answered, his voice matter-of-fact. The wolves found him before your father's men could. They tracked him through the storm for nearly a mile before bringing him down. A chill ran through Lily, despite the garden's artificial warmth. They killed him. Nature extracted its price. The old man replied simply. The mountain balanced its accounts. That's enough, John, Michael said sharply. She doesn't need those details. Chief Eagle shrugged, unperturbed by Michael's tone. The child has seen death already. Better she understands its purpose than fears its mystery. He reached into his pocket, extracting a small leather pouch which he placed in Lily's hand. For you, wolf medicine protection for one who has been claimed by the pack. Inside the pouch, Lily found a delicately carved wolf figure made of some dark stone, its eyes tiny chips of amber. It's beautiful, she whispered, somehow understanding the gift's significance without explanation. Your dog, Chief Eagle said, extending his hand for Shadow to sniff. He is more than he appears. He saved me, Lily said simply. The old man nodded, and called his brothers to aid you. Some bonds transcend our understanding. Michael cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. The doctors say you can come home tomorrow. Lily pad. Everything's arranged. Home. Lily frowned. The cabin burned down. Not that home. Our real home. In Helena. It's time we stopped hiding. The significance of this statement wasn't lost on Lily. For as long as she could remember, her father had maintained their household with fortress-like security, always watching, always prepared for threats. The cabin had been just one layer of that protective strategy. Sanchez's organization is finished, Agent Wilson explained. With the evidence you recovered, we've made arrests across 5 states. The few who escaped the initial sweep have gone to ground or fled the country. You're safe now, Lily. Safe, Lily repeated. Testing the word like an unfamiliar language, she looked down at Shadow, at his steadfast presence despite his own injuries, then at the carved wolf in her palm. What about the flash drive? Was it important? Michael knelt before her, taking her small hands in his. It contained everything I'd been gathering for 3 years. Financial records, communications, witness statements, all pointing to Sanchez's involvement in dozens of crimes, including, he swallowed hard, including your mother's murder. And now the truth is out, Lily said quietly. Yes. Michael's voice broke slightly. Thanks to you, your mother will finally have justice, and so will many others who suffered because of Sanchez. Chief Eagle rose, placing a weathered hand briefly on Lily's head. "Remember what you learned on the mountain, little one. Courage is not the absence of fear, but action in its presence. You have the heart of a wolf now, lonely sometimes, but never alone." As the old man departed, Lily found herself contemplating the strangeness of adult truths, how her mother had lived a double life, how her uncle had both betrayed and saved their family, how justice and vengeance could look so similar in the right light. The world had become more complicated in the space of a conversation, yet somehow more understandable too. "Dad," she said finally, "I think it's time you told me everything. About Mom, about Uncle Jimmy, about what really happened before the mountain." Michael met his daughter's gaze, seeing in it a wisdom beyond her years, the inevitable consequence of her ordeal. After a long moment, he nodded. "Yes," he agreed softly. "I think it is." Spring came late to Montana that year, as if winter had been reluctant to release its grip on the mountains that had witnessed so much bloodshed. By mid-April, the last patches of snow finally surrendered to warming temperatures, revealing the scarred earth where the cabin had once stood, 6 weeks after her ordeal. Lily stood at the edge of the clearing, shadow steady at her side, watching as federal agents conducted one final sweep of the property. "They won't find anything else," she said quietly to her father, who stood a few paces behind her. "The fire took everything." Michael Reynolds nodded, his hands deep in the pockets of his jacket against the mountain's lingering chill. "Standard procedure. We have to be thorough." Lily had come to recognize this voice, her father's professional tone, the one he used to keep emotion at bay. She heard it often these days, particularly when the conversation veered toward her mother or Uncle Jimmy. In the weeks since her hospital release, Michael had fulfilled his promise to tell her the truth, but each revelation seemed to reopen wounds he'd spent years trying to cauterize. "Can we see it?" she asked. "Where they buried Uncle Jimmy?" Michael hesitated, then nodded toward the ridge that overlooked the clearing. "Up there? The tribal elders insisted. Said he'd done wrong but died right, so he deserved to rest where he could watch over the valley." The path up the ridge was steep, still muddy from melting snow. Shadow navigated it easily despite his healing leg, pausing occasionally to wait for Lily to catch up. Her own recovery had been slower. The doctors warned that her compromised lungs would require months to fully heal, and Montana's high altitude made each breath a conscious effort. "Take it slow," Michael cautioned, his hand steady at her back. "We've got time." At the crest of the ridge, a simple marker stood like a lone sentinel against the vast Montana sky. No name adorned the weathered wood, just a carving of a wolf, eerily similar to the stone figure Chief Eagle had given her. Fresh wildflowers surrounded the base. Someone had been here recently. "The tribal elders come each week," Michael explained, noting her questioning glance. "Part of their tradition for fallen warriors." "Is that what Uncle Jimmy was, a warrior?" Michael sighed heavily, removing his sunglasses to rub the bridge of his nose. "Jimmy was many things. Lily, a soldier, a brother, a traitor, a protector. I'm still trying to reconcile all those versions of him in my mind." Lily knelt beside the marker, tracing the wolf carving with her fingertip. Shadow settled beside her, his posture alert yet peaceful. In the distance she could see the blackened foundation of what had been their refuge and nearly their tomb. "I keep thinking about what he said at the end," she murmured. that he didn't know it was Mom they were targeting. Do you believe him? The question hung in the mountain air between them. Michael had spent weeks analyzing the evidence on the flash drive, working with Agent Wilson to dismantle what remained of Sanchez's organization. The truth about Sarah's death had emerged in fragments orders issued by Diego, carried out by underlings, the deliberate sabotage of brake lines, made to look like mechanical failure. "I want to," he admitted finally. "The evidence suggests Jimmy arranged for someone to tamper with a federal witness's vehicle, a warning, not necessarily a killing. Sanchez altered the orders without telling him, targeting your mother specifically because of her work with me. So he was telling the truth." "Probably." Michael's jaw tightened. "But he still worked for them. Lily still helped them hurt people, even if he drew the line at his own family. That's not something I can easily forgive." Lily absorbed this, weighing her own complex feelings about the uncle she'd barely known. "But he saved me. And Shadow. He could have escaped with them, but he stayed." "Yes," Michael's voice softened. "In the end, he remembered who he was, who we raised him to be." They stood in silence for several minutes, each lost in private reflection. Shadow eventually rose, trotting to the ridge's edge where he stood watching something in the valley below. Lily followed his gaze to the tree line, where movement caught her eye, a flash of silver-gray pelt disappearing into the forest. "The wolves are still here," she observed. "They never left," Michael confirmed. "Fish and Wildlife tried to track the pack after what happened, but they're unusually elusive. Trail cameras only catch glimpses, almost like they're watching the watchers." A chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air ran through Lily. She remembered the wolves' eyes in the cabin, their purposeful movements, their selective violence. She glanced at Shadow, who remained focused on the distant tree line, ears erect, posture alert, but unalarmed. "Shadow knows them," she said with quiet certainty. "They're his friends." Michael placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "The psychological trauma you experienced, it's normal to create connections, narratives that help make sense of what happened." "It's not trauma, Dad. It's what I saw." Lily met her father's gaze steadily. "Shadow called them somehow. They protected us. They killed the bad men, but left us alone. That's what happened." Before Michael could formulate a suitably rational adult response, Agent Wilson appeared on the path below, waving to get their attention. "Michael, they've found something." Meh. The drive back to Helena was quiet, the SUV's interior a bubble of contemplative silence as mountains gave way to foothills and eventually the outskirts of the capital city. In the back seat, Lily leaned against Shadow, the dog's steady presence a comfort as she processed the day's final discovery. A lockbox somehow survived the inferno, buried beneath the cabin's foundation. Inside, protected by layers of fireproof material, a letter addressed to Michael in Jimmy's handwriting, dated 3 years earlier, long before the confrontation at the cabin. Michael had read it privately, his face draining of color before he carefully refolded the pages and tucked them into his jacket. Whatever revelations it contained, he wasn't ready to share them. "Are we ever going back?" Lily asked as they turned onto their street. "To the mountains." Michael hesitated, hands tightening on the steering wheel. "I don't know. Lily pad. There are a lot of memories there now. Not all of them good. Shadow likes it there," she persisted. "And I do too." Even after everything, it feels important. Her father's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, troubled but thoughtful. We'll see. For now, let's focus on getting back to normal. Normal. The word seemed to belong to another life before she'd learned her mother was murdered, before she'd hidden in a blizzard-bound cabin from killers, before wolves had intervened in human affairs with deadly precision. Lily wasn't sure what normal looked like anymore, or if she could ever return to it. Their house in Helena, the one her father had always called their city place, had been transformed in their absence. New security systems, refreshed interiors, even Shadow's bed upgraded to a memory foam mattress better suited to his recovering body. The changes were an obvious attempt to create distance from the past, to discourage thoughts of the cabin and what had transpired there. That night, after a quiet dinner of delivery pizza, Lily found her father in his study. Jimmy's letter spread before him, his eyes red-rimmed and distant. "Can I come in?" she asked from the doorway. Michael hastily folded the pages, but nodded, gesturing to the chair beside his desk. Lily settled into it, Shadow immediately positioning himself at her feet. "Are you okay, Dad?" He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just processing adult stuff." "The letter," she said. "From Uncle Jimmy." Michael nodded, running a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture that reminded her so much of the uncle she'd barely known. "He wrote it as a contingency, in case something happened to him. What does it say?" For a moment, she thought he might deflect the question with the usual adult evasions. Instead, he sighed heavily. "It's complicated, Lily, Jimmy." He had his reasons for the choices he made. Not good reasons, maybe, but reasons he believed in at the time. "Like what?" Michael studied her face, seeming to weigh how much a child could or should understand. "Your uncle and I, we had different ideas about justice, about right and wrong. After Afghanistan, he saw the world as a place where official channels often failed, where sometimes you had to work outside the system to effect real change. So he joined the bad guys to fight other bad guys." A sad smile touched Michael's lips. "Something like that. He believed he could do more good as an insider in criminal organizations than as a government agent bound by rules and regulations." "Did it work?" "Sometimes," Michael admitted reluctantly. "Some of our biggest cases were built on anonymous tips that I now know came from Jimmy. But the cost—" He shook his head. "The compromises he made, the lines he crossed. He became part of the evil he claimed to be fighting." Lily considered this, her young mind grappling with moral complexities most adults struggled to navigate. "But he tried to make it right in the end." "Yes," Michael agreed softly. "In the end, he remembered who he was supposed to be." He hesitated, then added, "The letter also mentioned your mother. Things I didn't know, things I'm still trying to understand." "What things?" "That's for another time, Lilypad. When you're older." She recognized the finality in his tone. This particular adult boundary would not be crossed tonight. Instead, she changed tack. "What happens now, with your work?" Michael leaned back in his chair, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "Officially, I'm on extended leave at least through the summer. After that, I'm considering a position at headquarters. Analysis work, not field operations, It would mean no more undercover assignments, no more extended absences. No more hiding, Lily added. No more hiding, he confirmed. It's time we built something more permanent, more honest. The word hung between them, laden with significance after so many years of necessary secrets and protective lies. Lily thought of all she'd learned since that night in the cabin about her mother's secret work, her uncle's complex betrayals, her father's dangerous double life. The truth had not been kind, but it had been illuminating. "I'd like that," she said finally. "Being honest." "Me too," Lily pad. "It's overdue." Weeks turned to months. Spring blossomed into summer, bringing healing in its wake. Lily's lungs grew stronger with each passing day. Shadow's limp disappeared entirely. The nightmares that had plagued them both gradually receded, replaced by dreamless sleep and, occasionally, for Lily, strange but peaceful visions of running through mountain forests alongside silver-furred companions. On a warm July morning, she found her father on the back porch, coffee in hand, studying a file bearing federal watermarks. "Working?" she asked, settling into the chair beside him. "Just reviewing some reports." He closed the file, giving her his full attention. "How would you feel about a trip?" "What kind of trip?" "A memorial, of sorts." "For your mom?" He hesitated. "And for Jimmy, too." "I suppose. There's a spot in the Bitterroot where your mother loved to photograph wildflowers. I thought we might visit. Maybe spend a few days camping. If you're ready." The prospect of returning to the mountains sent a complex ripple of emotions through Lily's apprehension, certainly, but also a strange anticipation, as if some part of her had been waiting for this suggestion. "Shadow would like that," she said, watching the dog dozing in a patch of morning sunlight. Michael smiled a genuine smile, the first she'd seen in months that reached his eyes. "Yes, I imagine he would." 2 days later, they stood at the trailhead of a remote path in the Bitterroot Range, several miles from where their cabin had once stood. Shadow moved with excited energy, nose working the mountain air, occasionally looking back as if to hurry them along. "It's about 2 miles to the meadow," Michael explained, shouldering his pack. "Take it slow if your breathing gets difficult." But Lily found, to her surprise, that her lungs seemed to expand in the mountain air rather than constrict. Each breath came easier than the last as they climbed steadily through pine forest and rocky outcroppings. Shadow ranged ahead, then back, his joy at returning to the wilderness evident in every movement. They reached the meadow by mid-morning. It spread before them like a painter's canvas, vibrant wildflowers carpeting the ground in purple, yellow, and white blooms that swayed gently in the mountain breeze. At the far edge, a small stream caught the sunlight, fracturing it into countless diamond sparkles. "Mom's favorite place," Lily said, memory stirring of a long-ago family picnic in this very spot. Michael nodded, emotion evident in his face. "She always said this was where she felt closest to heaven." They set up their camp at the meadow's edge, beneath the protective canopy of ancient pines. After a simple lunch, Michael produced a small wooden box from his pack. "Sarah left instruction," he explained softly, "for when you were old enough to understand, I think, after everything. You're ready now." Inside the box lay her mother's wedding ring and a small USB drive. "Her photographs," Michael explained. "The personal ones? Not her professional work. She wanted you to have them when the time was right." Lily held the ring so small in her palm, yet heavy with meaning. "Thank you." As afternoon mellowed toward evening, Shadow suddenly raised his head, ears alert, gaze fixed on the tree line across the meadow. Michael tensed instinctively, hand moving toward his hip where a weapon would normally be holstered. "It's okay, Dad," Lily said calmly. "They're just saying hello." At the forest's edge, partially obscured by shadow, stood 3 wolves, their silver-gray coats unmistakable even at a distance. The largest, a magnificent male with intelligent eyes, stepped partially into the sunlight, regarding them with what Lily could only describe as recognition. Shadow whined softly but made no move to approach or retreat. The wolves similarly held their position, neither threatening nor fleeing, merely acknowledging. "Remarkable," Michael murmured, hand dropping away from his absent weapon. "They're not showing any aggression." "They know us," Lily said simply. "They remember." After a long moment that seemed to stretch beyond the boundaries of normal time, the lead wolf raised his head in a silent salute before melting back into the forest, his companions following like shadows at dusk. "I've never seen anything like that," Michael admitted, his rational worldview visibly shaken. "In 20 years of wilderness experience." Lily leaned against him, her hand finding his. "Some things aren't meant to be explained. Remember, as night settled over the mountains, they built a small fire outside their tent. Shadow positioned himself at the boundary between firelight and darkness, his posture relaxed but vigilant. Overhead, stars emerged in impossible profusion, their light undimmed by city glow. "I miss them," Lily said into the comfortable silence. "Mom, even Uncle Jimmy, though I barely knew him." Michael nodded, adding another stick to the fire. "Me too. Lily pad. Every day. But I'm glad we know the truth now. Even the hard parts." Her father studied her across the flickering flames, pride evident in his gaze. "You're braver than I was at your age. Braver than most adults I know." Lily shook her head, absently touching the wolf carving that now hung on a leather cord around her neck. "Not brave, just not alone." She glanced at Shadow, then at the dark forest beyond their camp where mysterious allies kept silent watch. "None of us are ever really alone." Michael followed her gaze, something shifting in his expression, a softening, an acceptance of mysteries beyond his understanding. "No," he agreed quietly. "I suppose we're not." As if in answer, a lone howl rose from the distant ridgeline, a sound both mournful and triumphant, acknowledging loss while celebrating life's continuation. Shadow lifted his head, ears pricked toward the sound, but remained at his post, guardian of this small human family that had become his purpose. Lily closed her eyes, letting the mountain air fill her healing lungs, letting the wolf song wash over her like a blessing. Here, where tragedy and courage had intertwined, where family bonds had been both broken and reforged, she felt an unexpected peace settle over her. "We'll be okay," she said, opening her eyes to meet her father's gaze across the fire. Not a question, but a certainty. Michael studied his daughter's face so like her mother's, yet uniquely her own, and nodded. "Yes," he agreed. "We will." In the darkness beyond their firelight circle, The wolves kept silent vigil, guardians of hard-won truths and witnesses to the resilience of the human spirit. And somewhere, in whatever realm holds those who have passed beyond mortal concerns, Sarah and Jimmy Reynolds watched over their family divided by choices made in life, united in death by love that transcended betrayal, sacrifice that overcame failure. The mountain remembered it all, bearing silent witness to the eternal cycle of loss and healing, of endings that become new beginnings. And as the fire burned low and stars wheeled overhead, Lily Reynolds drifted toward sleep beneath Montana's vast sky. Shadow's warm presence beside her, secure in the knowledge that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it, that love endures beyond betrayal, and that even in our darkest moments, we are never truly alone.